Part of the Fielding Wing in the Huntington's American Art Galleries showcases quilts from the 19th century. Here, curator Lauren Cross speaks to the distinctive nature of the Amish quilts in the collection.
Much of what we know about standard quilts today really originated in Britain and came over through colonization and the making of our country. And so those earlier quilts were more like whole cloth quilts. So there was a different type of quilting tradition that was brought over. But then these 19th century quilts really started to take shape as our country changed. You know, we had to do different things to be able to keep our families warm. The patchwork quilt is probably the most common kind of that we can think of. And that's where you're just using basic, squares of fabric and putting them all together. But then you have different designs like the Lawn Star, the log cabin, which you have like a medallion in the center and then strip quilts and bars around it. And so there's an architectural quality to quilts as well. We are a very diverse country, right? So each culture brought to America their own unique needlework or fiber traditions. And so then those kind of traditions started to kind of intermingle with these more traditional styles. So you kind of have a mixing of cultural awareness and values. So with the Amish quilt, this is a culture that, it's a Germanic culture that didn't necessarily come to this country with their own quilting traditions, but they absolutely had fiber traditions or needlework traditions. And so you can see the traces of their own traditions being embedded in the quilt making process. But even more specifically, the Amish are certainly more on the conservative end of, the colors that they choose, the actual designs. It's like a very subtle way of being elaborate, but like not too much, not going too far, but that represents their values, right? And how do you translate one's values and what you believe into an object? And so they do that so well. It's like when you look at an Amish quilt, you're like, oh, this makes so much sense because you feel the tone, you feel the colors that you typically see within Amish culture. You see all of those things embedded in the quilt. I think that's the beauty of quilting is that it really is, especially American quilting, it's like, it really is the coming together of different cultures. And so like the Amish, they, their roots don't begin in America, but they came here and they made this their home. And so their quilts reflect that transition, right? Of like, what does it mean to really be a part of a new place? And it's absolutely a work of art. And many times, you can look at a quilt and you can compare it to a painting. You can see the translation is quite perfect. There's something very satisfying about working with fabric, and that comes out when you see a final quilt. You feel that sense of warmth, that calmness, that tenderness, and it carries. Like when I walk in this gallery, I feel that tenderness and care because that's what was put into the quilt.